This is the Absolute Business Mindset podcast, created and hosted by Mark Hayward. I am a corporate employee with an entrepreneurial mindset. This podcast will help and support you with new ideas about business. These are my thoughts, ideas, and comments. Today, we're going to talk to Ant McGinley about his varied career and really fascinating journey that he's had into podcasts. What would you say? Glitterati.
Notoriety.
So we're going to go into the interview. Just before we go into it, I just want to say any feedback, any ideas that you have about the content or who you would like to be interviewed, please go to absolutebusinessmindset@gmail.com. Hello, Ant. How are you?
Very well. Nice to see you. Hi, Mark.
Good to see you as well. So we've met. Well, I think we've spoken a couple of times online, haven't we?
Such is the modern world through the
yes,
London
unfortunately it is. And
of which I'm kind of an honorary member.
Just before we started, you said that you'd been down to London a couple of times for the face-to-face one, and shamefully, I haven't been to a face-to-face one for a few months. So it's tricky, but love the London podcast community. I think it's a really valuable forum.
Yeah, Johnny does a really good thing. It's not easy to sustain a community like that, and something that we'll talk about later. I'm currently trying to create something similar up in the north.
Awesome. Okay, do tell me about that. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk to you about is your 6 languages that you have said online that you speak.
Sim. Ich kann sprechen Deutsch. Io parlo portuguese, mi dispiace ma non ne parlo molto bene italiano, dwi'n licio trio siarad Cymraeg, what's that for? Obviously English, which is easier past that. I'll skip the gag about Australian and Irish. And then I know a little bit in other languages just through my travel, so I can do enough to sort of open doorways. So the couple of phrases here and there, I'm learning, so I wouldn't go so far as to say that I know them, but Mereko Daru Chai Abike Abi Jadikaro, which is loosely translated, go and get me some alcohol quickly in Hindi.
Yes. So most people, well, I say most people, I'm speaking for everyone else, it's always to be able to order 2 beers, please.
Yeah, and actually that's a really good start. If you could learn that, and if you think about it, like to learn dos cervejas, so Portuguese there straight away, and you can learn that, practice it a few times, you've got that nailed in the can. You could do that in a day, and actually over the course of a week you could learn that in all these different languages as well. And so you especially as people these days usually know where they're going to be traveling to.
Yes.
And so you can prepare for it that way as well. So that's something you can plan ahead. So if you've got a holiday, maybe a couple of business trips coming up, just learn those things, and you'll find that being able to say please, thank you, hello, opens the door. Yeah. The really fascinating thing about languages for me, and I'm not academically gifted in languages at all. My languages, if I'm completely honest with you, was when I moved to London in my early 20s after uni.
Right.
And every time I went out and met somebody interesting that I wanted to talk to, they were from a different country.
Right.
And so as part of the conversation, I got them to teach me something.
Right.
And so the first thing I learned in Italian, which stays with me today, is attenzione, gli alieni stanno arrivando, which is a warning that the aliens have landed.
Could be useful.
It could be very useful. But then that actually, your reaction is to laugh. Anybody in Italian is to be freaked out or to laugh as well. But it breaks the ice, it opens the door, and it starts the conversation. And it shows that you've made an effort to learn about the culture of the community. And the really interesting thing is, once you learn one language, the next time you learn a language, it's so much quicker. So I learned German. Then I was working in Italy for a while. I learned some Italian on the job. And then in between, little bits of Welsh and Hindi and Filipino language. And then about 2 years ago, I learnt Portuguese and Brazilian Portuguese, and went from 0 to competently fluent in 4 months. So
Wow.
yeah,
Well done,
so
you. But
yeah.
is it? Did you know Portuguese people? Were you spending time with
I was
Portuguese
yeah, I
people?
was spending time with a wonderful Brazilian at the time,
Right.
and that helped a lot. And that's a really great way if you want to learn a language, date somebody from that country, and
I was going to say immerse yourself in the culture, but
well,
equally date someone from the country works as well.
I think I'm all for selfies and traveling, but there's so much more to it. And I think to really travel and understand the culture, like go and see, eat the food, drink the wine, kiss the people, learn the dances, listen to the music, visit the buildings, stay there. Don't just take a
Yeah,
picture and get the T-shirt. That's part
yeah,
of it, but there's so much more. And learn the language, even just one or two or three words. And the really fascinating thing as well is you find as you move from country to country, the words change ever so slightly, and sometimes
yeah.
they change dramatically.
Right.
And I've got to the stage now where I get really disappointed. Where, for example, when you cross over from like the Czech Republic into Slovakia
Right.
and Poland, you've got those three, and
Yeah.
the language is quite similar around those borders. And at one stage, it kind of changes from being the greeting "Dzień dobry" to "Dobry dzień," and I'm like, oh, you're not even trying
You're
now.
not really sure which one to use, are
Yeah,
you?
switch it over. But I think the thing that stops us from advancing and learning languages is control, and we want to try and know everything that we want to say.
Mm.
But actually, you just need to learn some basics like I want, where is, how, who. Those kinds of basic words that we have,
Yeah.
and then just throw yourself into it, immerse yourself into it. A couple of numbers, as you say, 2 beers, those kinds of things. And the more you do it, the more you let go and go with it, the more you learn. And I've got to the stage now where, I wouldn't even say that I'm fluent in English, and that's not just because I'm from the north, but I have a confidence with that. And I probably know far less words in Portuguese than any of the other languages, but it's my strongest language now because I'm so comfortable with it, and I almost have a basic formula. So I'll guess if I don't know what a thing is.
Yeah.
I'll guess or maybe find a way around to say, oh, do you have one of those metal it hot so you can have tea? Yeah. So yeah, I'll know the words to say that and be comfortable around it.
Yeah,
But
no, it's really interesting because a couple of years or quite a few years ago, I wasn't dating, but I spent a bit of time with some people from Czech Republic,
mhm.
and it was really interesting when we actually went. Oh, a couple of friends went over to Prague. I'd been there before, but totally different experience going with a friend who lived over there for many years. It was really fascinating. But what I found really fun was when they were talking in Czech, they would drop in English words because there just was no translation to it.
Yeah.
And it was really interesting that the types of words that just don't translate into another language, and they are dropping those in very naturally.
Yeah, so part of the little Welsh that I know comes from spending time. I worked on a radio station there for just shy of a year, and the station that I worked on was English language, but in a very heavy Welsh area. And
Right.
so part of the license was a certain percentage of it had to be Welsh.
Right.
And on my drive time show, 2 of the news bulletins would be in Welsh.
Mm.
And so we had a dedicated news team, and then we shared the office with a station that was 90% Welsh and 10% English, and I would sometimes do the English show on there.
Yeah.
But the Welsh presenters there who were born with Welsh as their first language,
Yeah.
some of them only learned English when they went to school, even though they spoke Welsh every day, because Welsh as a language almost disappeared and then as having something of a resurgence.
Mm.
There are words and terms and things that come along where you go, well, like, how do we say Brexit, for example? Because it's a combination of English words that's been made up because of something politically that's been happening. So how do we fit that in? Things like computer, all these different things. And then so you've got to obey the rules of the language with the new words. And then, but even though they were all natural Welsh speakers, the radio station would pay for them all to have a Welsh lesson every month so that they
Right.
could be up to date with all the current terms and
Right.
how to use them.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Right, I'm going to jump straight into your degrees or your attempts at university, let's say.
Yeah.
So the first one you did was an engineering degree, or you did a foundation for an engineering.
Yeah, and before anybody pulls me out, I didn't actually complete the whole degree. I did 1 year of that and then changed. And when I say changed, I'll be completely honest. I was asked to resit.
Okay. Okay.
And so I went, and basically I spent the whole year immersed in and playing American football. I effectively became the jock that you see in the movies.
Oh,
And
really?
I chose that university because they had an American football team. And
Right.
I have a list, which I wrote when I was about 15. And I have a list of things that I want to do. And I find it every now and then when I go back to my parents' house. I still got it in a folder.
Yeah.
And I'll tick off the things that I've done, and then add a few new things that I didn't think I'd want to do that I have done, and things that I want to do. And I always wanted to play American football.
Oh, amazing.
And
I really like American football.
yeah,
I'm probably, well, no, that's tell a lie. London has really become a bit of a hotbed for American football with
yeah, it has.
their games.
Yeah, I saw the Titans last year. That was a great game, which was actually, believe it or not, my first ever live regular season NFL game. Whenever I've been traveling and speaking in America, I've always timed it wrong. So I've either been out in February, so after the season, or been out in August, so before the season really gets going. So but I did see, and this is something quite cool, I did see the New York Jets beat the Philadelphia Eagles the season the Eagles won the Super Bowl. And it was the last,
very rare for the Jets to win any match, first of all, but to beat
exactly the Eagles, as they say. And that was literally, so it was the last preseason game, and so it was a half full stadium, but still that was my first real experience of getting to do it. And it did make me go at that point. I don't know if you've ever seen like the college stadiums that they have out there, but
they're massive, aren't they?
Oh yeah, so that's my playing. To be honest, I wasn't that good. It's not like I could have made it at the college system. Again, that's just something to before anybody pulls me up. But I loved it. I enjoyed it. I got really into it. I loved it.
What position were you?
Well, I doubled up because we only had like a squad of 17, so we played Ironman football. So it was pretty hard. So we played special teams, offense, and defense. And so I started off as a running back, and then ended up being wide receiver. I played linebacker. Regular position, favorite position was free safety. Got a bit of pace on me. But I once, due to injuries, I did play for 2 plays on the line. Now, when the usual defensive lineman is 2 or 3 times my weight and size, I didn't last very long. But when there's an injury and you've not got the squad, you have to step up.
Oh, that's brilliant. That's brilliant. But you then moved from engineering to psychology. What was the inspiration behind that?
The honest thing was while I was doing started on the engineering degree, I found it very intensive and very quickly realized I wasn't engaged with it. And although I have an appreciation for architecture now, we would have 1-hour lectures on concrete. And like at 18, when I'm playing American football and experiencing the freedom of university, I was like, I'm struggling. I'm really struggling with this bit. And I mean, there was a couple of modules of it that I really liked, like the design side of things, but I just couldn't engage. And then I was somewhat shocked when at the end of the year, they kind of said, passing 2 modules is not enough to get you onto the second year.
Oh, that's a bit harsh, isn't
So
it?
so I'd met some people that had done that were doing psychology, found them quite interesting.
Yeah.
And so I moved back to Manchester, did a couple of A levels at night class. Well, actually, what happened was I did psychology at night class and a sociology A level in the morning class, and then got a job which was on a rotating shift pattern. So I could only do one of them a week.
Oh, right.
And I did trying to do A levels in a year anyway. It was quite intense, but effectively I was trying to do them with half the study in a year. But I got enough, it gave me enough to give me a good flavour, and decided I wanted to do psychology, explore that. And through doing that, I ended up with my first experiences of media and radio, because they had a really good student station set up where I went. So
right, we will get on to the radio. There's just one thing that you put far too much online. I'm sorry.
I didn't realize this until you kind of ran down the list before, and I'm like, so as soon as this finishes, I'll be like shoring up my my Facebook and YouTube security settings.
So you were a match day announcer at a football club?
Yes. Yeah.
Right. First thing, this is a 2-part question. First thing, how did that come about? And secondly, like, it must have been a lot of fun being in the middle of a sort of football environment, and sort of, you obviously have a passion for football with your podcast, and we'll talk about that later. So how did you come about, and what was it like?
Well, you are looking at the face of a man who has, for of about 3.5 seconds, appeared on Match of the Day Wales.
Wow.
Yeah, that's me.
Right, what's that? That is 12 minutes and 31 seconds. I'm gonna get that clip, and I'm just gonna put it on YouTube and on Instagram. This was your claim to fame.
Yeah, what one of several.
What more do we want?
So no, I worked for. So getting the job was actually, that job came as a result of another job that I was doing. So I was working for Coast 96.3 as it was, which is now a Heart station in North Wales, and they'd signed a deal with Rill Football Club. And Rill at the time were coming back. I think Rill domestically, you'll have to look at the record books, are the only, still the only British team to have won 4 trophies in one season, if you don't count the Community Shield, which Manchester City got last year as well.
Yeah.
They did that because there's a couple of different cup competitions. And they're based just inside Wales, if you will, and Bangor's the other side, but the station covered the whole of the North Coast.
Okay.
And the deal was, as part of the connection, we would do special updates, special features on the particular show that I was doing.
Yeah.
And then I would come, and there'd be branding around the pitch, and also we'd play some like especially audio branded music around the game in the build up to the game, and also when goals were scored, that kind of thing. So there's probably a lot of Rill fans that would hate me for doing that, because I was kind of the face of the commercialization, the death of the game. But it was a brilliant stadium to be at. Great club, great memories. A very small, and it wasn't like I was up in the stands away from everyone, because I literally just opened the door and there's like 300 people sat there. And I mean, sometimes there would be games where there's only 300 people at. But yeah, it was a great thing to do. And you're faced with the problems of going, who scored that? What was that? Because you do, and actually that's the real reason why they play the music when the goal goes in, to give you the time,
to give you 10 seconds
to figure out who it was.
What number was that? Look on your sheet.
And somebody else would go and find out, and then come back and tell me, I think it's that. And yeah, but this was in much simpler times. So we're going back maybe 12 or 13 years before VAR or any of those problems. So.
Yes, we could go. You've mentioned 2 things, which is very topical, which we're going to talk neither about. So we're not going to talk about Brexit, and we're not going to talk about VAR.
Because nobody understands either of them, let's be honest.
So let's start talking about your radio part of your career. So you're now on podcasts named as a producer and creator.
Mm-hmm.
But you started off as a presenter.
Yes.
So I'm thinking Coast and Mercia and Beacon.
Yeah, and I still do some presenting as well. So just last night I was presenting on a podcast, and occasionally I'll do little bits. But how did that all start? So I the first day I went to university to do psychology, I went up at the welcome party. There was a DJ on, and I just learned how to DJ. And I thought, I'm going to need a job to help me get through uni. And I said to the DJ, is there any opportunity? And he kind of fobbed me off. But the guy stood next to him was a chap who just set up the student radio station and said, come and have a chat and we'll see.
Right.
And so at the time I thought, brilliant, yeah, I'd love to do this. This is perfect. This is what I've always wanted to do. And I used to listen a lot to the evening session, which was big on Radio 1 at the time, Steve Lamacq and Joe Wiley.
Yep.
And I really wanted to be just like them. I used to record the show, and I was like, brilliant. But then I suddenly realized the day I was going to have this meeting that I had no experience, no connections. I didn't know any of the bands. I didn't know where I'd even get records from. So how could I do something that they did?
Yeah.
So I thought, I'll just have to make it more me. Right. So I walked into the meeting, and he says, right, so have you got any ideas about what you want to do? And yep, the show's going to be called Egomania. It's all about me, and I'm just going to play Tom Jones and take that. And he was like, great, you're doing Wednesdays and Thursdays at 3:00. And that was it. That's how it started. Yeah, and I think
it's really interesting that you went to student radio, and obviously student radio is a well-trodden path for lots of people in the arena. But I will tell you 2 things now. First thing, I worked in a pub for 2 years while I was at university. Not glamorous. I mean, I suppose your student radio wasn't necessarily glamorous, but that was a good time, but it was there was a lot of drinking.
Yeah.
And the second thing that you say about student radio, so this was I'm making confessions here. About 8 years ago, maybe even a little bit longer, I went for a hospital radio because I was listening to
Hmm.
Chris Moyles and a little bit of Radio 1 in the evenings and stuff, and Steve Lamack and stuff. And I thought to myself, well, I listen to radio, I can do that. So I turned up for the interview, and they go, well, what type of music do you like? So I tell them my music is indie rock, sort of that sort. Well, like it was like we played Tom Jones and Take That. I'm like, have you got any of the music? No, not really. This is not the sort of stuff we play on there. And I walked out of that interview and I thought, I'm not going to get that gig. So I would say it's fascinating that A, you pulled it off, which is impressive in the first case, but B, you've based your career on starting point on radio.
Well, can I just point out, first of all, that one, it wasn't glamorous or paid, and two, we were actually in a porter cabin out the back of the student pub. And so quite often you could hear this sound, which is like a combination between thunder and a car crash. And it was the empty barrels being rolled around the back of the. And occasionally, if you were doing a late night show, you would have one student who'd lost their way and mistook the side wall for the bathroom. And so it was literally, we had 2 turntables, a microphone, 2 CD players, and a mini disc player, and a telephone. That was it.
Right.
And that's how we started it.
And did you get any? So we're all now into analytics and sort of ratings and how many people listen to your podcast and whatever. Did you ever get any sort of idea of the sort of listenership at your student radio?
So we just had to guess, and so that's I'll be completely honest now. Even now, right? And I'm not making anything up here. I'm not revealing anything that people don't know. But most audience figures are made up. They're all guessed. They're extrapolated.
Right.
I mean, the station I worked for, which I won't name in case I get in trouble, the way they do the figures, they sort of extrapolate to mean sort of so many people. Anyway, the figures came back and we had 5,000 people listening in this particular postcode, which is a village which only has 1,000 people living in. Right? maybe they had some kind of mini festival or everybody had friends over, but there is that. But I do remember when we were doing the student radio, on 3 occasions we got letters. And one was from like a ham radio guy who picked up the signal like in Norway.
Right.
And like, I think we ended up getting in trouble for maybe broadcasting a bit too strong. But he wrote to us and said, I was listening at this time and I heard this song and this person. Could you confirm that it was, so I can tick it off my list, whatever way that works?
Right.
And then one of the other occasions, we got a letter from somebody who was listening in the prison. This was in Leicester, if you know Leicester. Not too far.
I went to university at Leicester.
Okay. So I was de Montfort. So I was the ex-poly. But the prison's like this old castle. It's very impressive. And I remember the bosses of the station going, can we really talk about or read this out on air, because it's somebody that's in prison and it's somebody that is, maybe we're not sure why they're in prison, they've been excluded from society, should we there? And I was like, So I went on air the next show. I went, we got a letter from the prison. I tell you what, if you can get here by the end of the show, right, we'll give you a T-shirt and a bunch of CDs. They never turned up.
No, never turned up.
I'm just assuming they didn't hear it.
Yes, of course. Yeah. So what was the sort of format that you had in student radio? You joked about Tom Jones and Take That, but was it music based? Was it voice based?
So a lot of it was kind of down to whoever turned up and did something. Let's be completely honest. At the time, they had this area, and as long as you didn't do anything particularly outrageous, you were fine. And they would try, as things started to grow, record companies realized it was a great place to sort of embed new artists, and then so they would send the CDs, and then there was an encouragement for us to play them, have a playlist then that could become a chart that they could use for their marketing. So we did have some songs that we had to play, but we had a little bit of leeway and freedom as long as we hit the news and played any adverts that we had. it was fine. But I always played fast and loose with it. So, I mean, some of my strongest memories, and Jim that I make on the left side with, that's where we met, and we did some amazing things together. When I say Tom Jones, I once played What's New Pussycat 17 times in one show. Everyone talks about John Peel, who played Teenage Kicks back to back one night, and other occasions when he played whole albums all the way through. Nobody's ever done that. 17 times in one 2-hour show.
Did you take your earphones off after number 12?
Oh no! See, I have to say, I actually saw Tom Jones perform live for the first time this year in Kendall Calling. I was a little bit disappointed.
Oh,
yeah, but because he just did like modern versions of all the songs, which is fair enough. He's been playing these songs for 50 years. I give him a break. But it was just the crowd were eating out of the palm of his hand. They just all wanted to join in for Delilah. Yeah.
Oh,
even his sex bomb was a bit flat. How do you have a flat sex bomb,
How can you
Tom?
have that?
Yeah.
God, I don't know how you can mess that one up.
Anyway, these are all valuable business lessons. I hope you're writing them all down.
Yes. Oh no, absolutely. They'll be part of my social media for the next 3 months. I'll be talking about this. So you moved on to, after university, you moved on to the breakfast show. Now I think this is really impressive. Now you're probably going to tell me that it's not, but I think you worked on XFM, which is now Radio X.
Yes. So I never did the breakfast show on XFM. I did produce on the breakfast show as holiday cover, and I did feature regularly on their shows a little bit. So again, Jim that I worked with, he was the producer at the time. Right. And it's very incestuous, actually. The presenter at the time, his wife is somebody I'm working with on another project, which we'll come to later. So I did work at XFM. I was doing, I think you've probably taken that from an extrapolation of all the brands that I worked for at the time. Yes. Okay. So I worked for what was GCAP, which then became Global, which was Coast 96.3. And then I did the breakfast show at Mercia in Coventry. And I was doing that. I also worked on various brands coming up, like Kerrang, which became a radio station. And I was one of the team that worked on The Storm, which was the model that eventually became XFM. So they actually won the rights to have a station in Manchester based on what we'd done with The Storm. But then what happened was the two brands merged, and they had these very similar brands, XFM and The Storm. The Storm was a digital-only, quite new thing. XFM was established in London. They came together, and that was a great brand to work for. But probably the most fun brand I've ever worked for was more recent times. About 5 years ago, I worked for. Was it 5 years ago? Yeah, 6 years ago. 5, 6 doesn't matter. Jack FM. In Southampton, which is now merged in the company. And it was one of the most fun stations I've ever worked for, because the tagline was playing what we want.
Nice.
That's it. We play what we want. And the whole thing was like no requests. And quite often what you would do is you'd open the phone and you go, "Hi, yeah, it's Mark. Can you play Mustang Sally by the Commitments?" And we go, "No." And it's like, we play what we want. And that was the whole thing. And that kind of that one phrase really encapsulated the whole station, and that's been quite an inspiration to me as well. And I think it's important for anybody that's got a brand, especially any kind of business, is can you say who you are, define your personality in one statement? And that really did that. And so we had this kind of ability to be kind of fast and loose with the format, also with the content, the things that we talked about, and even within context, some of the language that we did because of what we were working around. But it was that playing what we want. That was the attitude, and it was so much fun. And anybody that's that was in London about 20 years ago will remember Bam Bam and Street Boy, and Bam Bam did the breakfast show. So that was fun to work with him, and occasionally I get to work with him and cover him when he was away. But I worked for a whole bunch of radio stations. Got fired from a bunch as well, which happens. Favorite story, I'll tell this, it annoys him a little bit, but I was once fired, no word of a lie, for eating a Twix that didn't belong to me.
Did it belong to the presenter? You don't know.
So basically, anybody that's ever worked in sort of any office will know that everybody brings chocolates, cakes for birthdays, whatever, leaves them out. Anyway, so I just, there we go.
Tucked in and
tucked in. But the worst of it is I don't even remember having the Twix. I don't even remember. I'm not saying I didn't eat it. But like I don't remember. Like if I could go, oh yeah, it was a good one.
Yeah, savoured that moment.
The funniest thing was they asked me to, return my keys and my pass. I was sacked over the phone basically.
Oh, nice.
And we just had a party and I couldn't find them. So it was a couple of months before I could find my keys and pass.
Yeah.
And so I found them, put them in an envelope, and then I thought, got a Twix, ate it, and put the wrapper in the envelope and sent it back. However, in the intervening 3 months, the guy that had sacked me and his boss had both left the station. And so
they didn't even get the delivery.
No, so somebody somewhere in the course of their day once opened an envelope and found a pass with my picture on, a key, and a Twix wrapper.
They must have been confused.
Yeah, that's weird. If that was you and you're seeing this now, contact us and we'll be friends.
Right, so this is the Absolute Business Mindset podcast. We're going to talk a bit. We've talked a lot of non-business. I'm just going to rein it back slightly.
Okay.
What's the money like working for XFM?
The money in radio generally is always like, working TV, unless you're unless you're on the big platform. I mean, even when I was doing a breakfast show for what became a global brand, because it was a small station, it was regional, it wasn't that great. But I used to often say, well, it's like getting into the Premier League with Huddersfield. You're there. You eventually you might be seen by Manchester United and go and play for them. Yeah. It wasn't great. It was good because it was only a couple of hours a day, effectively.
Yeah.
But,
and what did you sort of occupy yourself with the rest of the day? Drinking?
No, I've never really been that big a drinker, actually.
Okay.
But I think at the time I was just thinking, this is great. And I do distinctly remember playing a lot of video games and having quite an interesting lifestyle. The thing is, when you're doing a breakfast show as well, it really messes up your lifestyle. It's very difficult to do. And I think drinking would make it a lot worse. I can understand why people would. But effectively, like I've got some friends that are just doing it for a station up here in Manchester. They're just coming up to 6 months in the gig. And they started at the perfect time because they started as the days were getting longer. So they'd wake up and it'd be bright. Yeah. Now it's hitting them hard. because they're kind of, they're going when it's dark, they're finishing the show and it's still dark. Yeah, and then it doesn't even brighten up. And it does make it difficult for your social life because it's very difficult to do anything of an evening. It's great if you've got kids. If you've got young kids, young family, takes care of all your childcare needs.
Yeah. Okay. Another business question.
Mm-hmm.
Right,
Can't
2 in a row.
Answer. Okay.
You ready?
Yeah.
So a friend of mine is involved with radio, and he's sort of trying to kick off a very unique style. He's going to kill me if I tell you what it is, so I'll have to keep that under wraps for now.
Okay.
But the important thing that he said to me was, don't be confused with radio. Radio is about the adverts. It's not about the presenter. It's not about the music. It's about the adverts. Would you agree?
Oh, I think he has a point, and I can see where he comes from. And actually, what you've had in the last, around Easter this year. So there was a lot of redundancies in radio. They got rid of a lot of presenters, a lot of producers, because of a change in the Ofcom regulations. Now, it used to be, and maybe notice this in the background and not being fully aware of it, but it used to be that you would have loads and loads of presenters and it'd be live all the time. And now you'll notice radio a lot of the time is just music and nobody there talking. Mm-hmm. And that is because they changed the regulations. So it used to be you had to have so many hours of live presenters every day.
Right.
And then they made it so, well, you've got to have so many of these hours have to be local hours. So you can't have a network station.
Right.
But now, effectively, with the changes, they've done it so that you effectively have what the aim was at the beginning, but changed over time, was local radio at a national level. So national to broadcast on a national level, like the likes of Radio One or Talksport or something like that, they're very expensive licenses to run. There's also a competition; they don't come up very often. Regional licenses and digital licenses, those things will come up more often.
Right.
And so there was one company that, if you go back, is the heritage of global radio, and they never managed to win one of these licenses. It was like a license to print money if you won it. And so what they would do is they would just go and buy lots of stations and build this network and share resources. From a business sense, made perfect sense.
Yeah.
And they've continued that today, and that sort of what I see, and I'm very much out of that industry now. I still dip in a little bit. They continue that model, and within that model, I kind of understand from a business point of view and a management sense, it does make sense. You know, the radio, the difficulty is they sell the adverts, and they sell the adverts. The price they sell the adverts at is based on how many people listen.
Right. And you've already told me how many people listen.
Yeah. Well, the also problem that they've got with that is one of the problems with commercial radio that people will tend to say the reasons why they don't listen is because of too many adverts.
Right.
And so this is a very fine balancing act that they need to do it. And this is the reason why they're now starting to look at other platforms, because things like podcasting and YouTube, you can actually get much better metrics and measure them, and also support what you're doing. Also, there's a whole new generation that aren't even listening to the radio; they're consuming it through those areas. And so they're looking. Plus, as well, if you're a station, even in a city the size of Manchester, small station, the best figures you may get for in terms of listenership and reach is 125,000.
Okay.
You could build up a podcast audience like that in the space of a year and keep building and growing and growing. You're not going to get a bigger influx of listeners into Manchester, but you may grow out there. So this is something that is working in a different way.
Yeah.
Obviously, it changes the kind of marketing and advertising that you can do, because if suddenly you're appealing to a global audience, you can't take an advert from the shoe shop that's on your high street, unless they do deliveries and they change their business model.
Interesting. I'm glad I got your insight into that. So enough of that business silliness, asking those questions. So
on to the serious stuff. This is why
serious
people.
Stuff. Now back on to you worked for P&O as an entertainment officer.
I did. And
so,
but I'm going to give
a two-party question again.
Yeah.
Right. Was it physically and mentally really hard, or was it just fun all the day?
If you have a business, if you have your own business, and somebody applies for a job and they've got a background working at sea, and they've done more than 6 months on the ship, hire that person. I will tell you that now, because my experience of, and I did just under 3 years,
which is a decent stint.
It was very decent. Just under 3 years, and in that time, let's see, I don't know how many places that I would have been to and seen, but my average working week is something that would make a junior doctor quit, because it would not be unusual for me to put in. I mean, in theory, we are limited to 14-hour days.
14-hour days. That's quite tough.
Yeah, and bear in mind as well, we would work consistently for our contract, and so my longest contract was 7 months. Some people will do contracts that'll be even longer, and so you're working every day on that contract. Very rare that you would get a day when you would have nothing to do.
So you didn't ever get any time off if you stopped off somewhere? You could just go visit, or
it just depended on you. I would still be working that day, but I might have a few hours in the morning or the afternoon, or if you did a deal with somebody else to cover you. And you would have more time, and then the next port you would work all day. One of the biggest mistakes in my life was being conned by somebody, so I spent the whole day at Bora Bora on the ship watching everybody else do it, and there's nobody on the ship, nothing for me to do because everyone was off. And it's a really difficult place to get, and it's beautiful and stunning, and it's the kind of place where you step into the water and sharks and turtles and just come up to you.
Bora.
In the middle of the Pacific. It's a tiny little island. Yeah, so to Bora Bora, Tahiti, whatever. So impossible to get to.
Yeah.
I know a lot about it because everybody else went and told me about it.
They told you about it.
But I mean, I would regularly do weeks that was 100 plus hours. That was not unheard of. And
did you enjoy it?
Oh, I loved it. But at the same time, I kind of found it difficult at times. Everybody on there that works also has an emergency duty, and so I was actually at home when you had the Concordia disaster, when the ship tipped over. Italian ship came over.
Yeah.
So that rattled me quite a bit because as part of my job, in my role, I was an entertainment officer. As soon as we moved into an emergency situation, my job was to manage a muster station. Anybody that's ever been on a cruise ship, that's where you put your jackets on. Yeah. And my job was to keep them calm and keep them ready, and then get them ready if we needed to move them into the lifeboat.
Yeah.
And one of the things that really threw the whole industry after Concordia was all the training that they do on cruise ships for evacuation is based on the fact that the ships are designed to stay level, even if there's a hole punctured in them.
Right.
And so suddenly when the ship's at 45 degrees like that, there's all those drills that we've done.
Yeah.
They work with people walking calmly, shuffling along in a snake formation, going, but it was brilliant. I saw some amazing places, met some amazing people, learned some new languages. Kamusta to all my Filipino friends. But I got to the stage where I'd done a good innings. I think had I gone 10 years earlier, I would have done it for 10 years longer. But 3 years was a good,
I think it, because I did envisage it being quite tough and quite physically and mentally quite didn't realize how long a period you had to work on there for. So
it does
kudos to you.
It does depend on your job and your role. But I did bump into an old colleague at Heathrow Airport, and he works in the tech team. So we had a fully working theatre that sat 800 people on the ship, and he was working in one of the concessions at Heathrow. And I asked how he was getting on, and he says, "Oh, I'm loving it. It's brilliant, and everybody loves me." He says, "Because I cover everyone's shift. I do double shifts all the time, and my double shifts are still shorter than the regular shifts we did on the ship." So he's like, stamina-wise, he's fine. And I think that's the thing. So I kind of came back from the ships, and I was like, I've done it. I don't need to do any more. And there'll be few times when I'll work as intensely or as hard as I did on the ships. And bear in mind as well, if one of your team is sick or has to go home for whatever reason, there's no replacements. It's not like you can call a recruitment agency and get somebody to swim out and join the ship.
Yeah.
So,
I don't have the same experience, but I can sort of think of it like when I worked in pubs. So I worked at university in pubs, and then after university, worked in a couple of pubs and bars and things, and that was physically draining, that was mentally draining, concentration that you had to do for that. So and that's just a fraction, because you're doing like 5-6 hour.
The thing that was quite intensive as well was I was basically probably the first person that you would meet on the ship a lot of the time. And bear in mind,
everyone would know you.
We would change passengers at least once a week, average once a week. And so we could have up to 3,000 passengers on the ship. And so even if I didn't meet everyone, at a conservative effort, I would meet. And when I say meet, shake hands, exchange names with, have a drink with, sometimes have dinner with, at least 50,000 passengers a year.
Wow. I think you're better off out of it, don't you?
Yeah, I still remember all their names as well.
Yeah,
we'll do that at the end. We'll do that at the end.
Yeah, I'll put it in the show notes. Right. Okay. So let's switch again to podcasts. So what? So obviously I do my own podcast, but what attracted you from radio to podcast? Did you see it as a trend that was going to hit off as it has, or were you just interested in the sort of the craft of it?
So I got into podcasts was it just as, or even before? It was just as the iPod had come to the UK.
Right.
And so at the time, to listen to any kind of podcast, what you would have to do is download it onto your computer and then transfer it onto your iPod, because they weren't Wi-Fi enabled at that time.
Yeah.
And the first few podcasts were just record on computer microphones. There wasn't many very creative ones out there, but I instantly saw the potential in them, and I saw that there was a gap that they could fill that wasn't being taken care of by traditional audio mediums.
Yeah.
A lot of people make a big deal about the fact that, oh, well, there's no regulation, so you can swear on there. Great, that's fine. But after a while, if you're going to do that, use it very sparingly, because it's like any word. That's my view on swearing.
Yeah.
If you use any word over and over and over again, and there's probably a few that I've done this, it doesn't mean anything. So I made my first podcast in 2005.
So I was going to say, so the iPhone came out in 2007.
Yep.
So you were doing it before the iPhone even came out?
Yeah. And I wasn't
so
doing
people
it.
were listening on desktop, were they?
So people would listen on desktop, or they would actually. So the iPod itself came out 4 years before.
Okay.
So I mean, the brief history of podcasting is in 2003, through the development of RSS, they realized that you could have sequential audio, which was effectively allowed you for a podcast to get a notification when there's a new episode. That was in 2003. And then 1 year later, in 2004, Apple invented it. They did make it much easier to do things. Although...
Apple are well versed, and never the first, but do it a lot better.
Yeah. I know Ted and Steve that kind of head up the department at Apple, so I'll say that very much with my tongue in my cheek in case they see this. So I did that, and then before I could really sink my teeth into it and take off, I got a job which I've been chasing for a long time in commercial radio as a presenter. So then that took me away for a few years. Then I went to sea, and then I came back from that sort of period of my life. And podcasting had kind of grown up a little bit, and I was exposed to more podcasts from America. There's a show called Radio Lab, which is made by NPR, which is kind of a radio show first, but it has had real success as a podcast. It's one of them, in terms of revenue, you want to see about making money, that does a lot. That does very well. They've got a great model that's set up very well.
Well, and the one I always have always been inspired by is Entrepreneur on Fire with John Lee Dumas.
I know John.
He puts up every month how much he's earned, and every time I go onto his website, I think, I'm not earning that. Nowhere near that.
Yeah, well, the thing is, John. John's a really interesting guy. So I met John about 3 years ago when I went to my first podcast movement, and he was there, and there was this flurry about him. And when I'd come back and started to move into podcasting, John's was one of the first videos that I'd seen online about how to make your podcast. And while I didn't agree with everything that he said, I could see that he'd broken it down, and he had a formula and a way of doing things. And but he has this real magnetism around him, and he just like a bunch of people that follow him everywhere. And so I remember speaking to him when I met him at this. It sounds very showbiz, but it was a rooftop party in Anaheim. And I said to him, I said, John, like, gotta say hello, but also I just want to ask, how do you cope? Because there were literally people following him around as if he could walk on water. And he said, you know what, it is a bit weird, he says, but it's actually really, really nice. I enjoy it. And he said, the best thing is I walk out of this building and nobody knows who I am.
Yeah.
And he said, so there is that. So he just enjoys it while he lasts. And he has a great setup and great life, and he does very well. And he's I mean, I wouldn't say that I know him or that he's my friend, but we've hung out.
So you're going to link us in, aren't you? You're gonna make the introduction. Like, this is the only reason why I interviewed you, was to get to John Lee Dumas.
Well, he does have. I do have one hook in that I have quite an interesting party trick, which he's a big fan of. And so if I offered to teach him how to do that, then maybe I could get you in. But that's a completely different podcast.
There's a different podcast, totally. And so one of the things I've found, so I've been doing my podcast just under 2 years, so not to your extent, but so you're living. I don't want to go into numbers, but do you do a few different things? It sounds like you do your On the Left Side podcast. You also are involved in other podcasts.
Yeah.
So do you sort of spread yourself across different platforms?
Yeah. So just with the one that sort of most well known for, and for which I've just been nominated at the Audible UK Audio Production Awards as Best Producer.
Congratulations.
It's very nice. We don't actually make any money off that. So that is a passion project, but it is very much a calling card. And actually that it fits in very well, because that show, though, what we've done with that has led to both myself and Jim that I do the show with getting lots of work in different areas, and also being invited to speak at different conferences, and that's led to other things as well.
Yeah. So this is on the left side, yeah?
Yeah. So
do
that's
you want to just do your pitch for the what it is? Give me 10 seconds.
10
You
seconds.
said you should be able to do it in a few words.
Yeah. On the left side is a soccer show that's not like Match of the Day. You don't have to even like football to like it. We just use football as a springboard. It's 10 minutes every week, every Thursday, and nothing is sacred. Everybody gets a little bit of ribbing, and it's just silly. To be honest, we spent more time in the last few episodes talking about involved with Lego. We've had a Shakespearean actor, and we've also had Sir Ian McKellen involved. Not the real one, but it was close.
Okay, so just on that. So I'm not a big, as we were talking beforehand, I'm not a big football fan. Not something I really grew up with, but I find it hilarious. Like that one you were saying about the Lego. I think that is absolute genius what he's done. And the funniest bit that I got out of all of that was that this is a revelation for all you listeners. You can't put someone sitting down in a stadium next to each other because the arms are in the way.
Yeah.
So you could get lodged in really tightly if you have no arms. Apart from that, you've got a problem.
Yeah, just to clarify as well, this is if you're a Lego figure.
This is a Lego. It's a Lego stadium.
And I would advise you all to go and check out FC Brickstand. You'll find them on all the social media and the website fcbrickstand.com. It's basically a quintessentially English eccentric who has built this football stadium, and he has live matches. And for £5, you can have a season ticket where he builds a Lego version of you that can sit in the stand and watch the games. It's very silly. It's wonderful. But as well, it reflects what's really going on. If you go and look on their Twitter feeds from last week, they did the whole Remembrance Sunday before the kickoff, and you see the whole thing, and they have everything come out. And then at the same time, you go back and they've got they've just reopened the club shop, and that's modelled the same way. So it reflects the good of football. It doesn't have any of the nonsense, but there's such joy. And actually, I don't really care like if they've won or lose. I just enjoy like watching it and being a part of that community.
It's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. I loved it. I thought it was absolutely hilarious. So what does success mean to you to do with podcasts?
Honestly, and I did say this on another podcast interview, Podcasting 101, with my friend Jason, and he caught me off guard with it, and I stand by the answer that I came up with. And I said, honestly, sometimes it's just hitting publish. It really is, because here's the thing is that, and I think that applies to so many things, is that, you know, when you hit publish with a podcast, that is you releasing it, that is you releasing ownership, that is putting it out there. There's nothing else I can do about it anymore. I mean, obviously I can pull the episode and nobody can listen to it, but you're kind of going, I've done it, it's there, it's going out. And there's always an inner battle, kind of, is it ready, is it not ready? And because of the way we work and the amount that we've put into it and other things going on, we have a deadline which we have to hit, which we have to get it out and put it there. But truth be told, I could spend every single episode that I've ever put out, I could easily spend another 2-3 hours working on, you know, just to kind of tweak that here. Or I'll listen back and go, but you can't do that. And I see that not just within podcasting, within other forms of media, like people have an idea for a book that they never write, or they've written a book and they never show it to anyone. Or they have a business idea, but they keep it to themselves because they don't want anybody to steal it, and then it disappears. Take a chance, put it out there.
I'd 100% agree. So the reason why I did it was why I personally wanted to do a podcast was that I thought I had a message. I thought I had something to say. And the first 60 of my episodes, I've just done 101.
Wow, well done.
The first 60 were just me talking, just me experiences, ideas, techniques, skills that I thought would help people. And as I say, like, it's only in the last 30 or 40 that I've started to do interviews, and I love doing the interviews now. I think it's fantastic. But at the start, as you say, it's do the recording and publish it.
Yeah.
That's your starting point. So I get that.
A friend of mine who's another Ant, he would say you've kind of graduated from the therapy phase. And for a lot of people,
Yes.
like, podcasting is like therapy because you're talking and nobody's interrupting you. Yeah? And it's this very, you know, the microphone just listens.
It just
doesn't
listens.
judge. It doesn't
answer
judge.
back.
Yeah.
Not
it
like
doesn't
my
give you
wife or my
advice.
kids.
Yeah, exactly. And it just very attentively is there with its little red light or whatever you've got going on, just there. Yeah. And it's almost like it's just going, I know, it's okay.
Yeah, I understand.
It's okay, Mark.
Yes.
It's okay.
Right. I am going to bring a little bit, not quite yet, but there's a couple of questions I want to ask you. And I am also running out of battery, which is very funny for me.
Right, okay. This is exciting. Let's go. Don't explain it, just do it.
You're all right
this is
for
going to be
now.
the best
Don't worry,
ever.
but I just spotted it there. I was like, oh, okay, I need to think about this. So first question for you is, what would you still like to achieve in your career? Could be a podcast, could be radio, could be another entertainment officer period of your life.
I'd very much like to travel some more. The show that I mentioned earlier, Radio Lab, on my bucket list is to guest produce an episode of that. That would be amazing, but a lot of work. I would like to live and work in a different country, which I've kind of done a little bit with the traveling, but I was always back on the ship. But I'd fully like to do that. So there's a couple of options in there, maybe Vancouver, New York, Berlin. I'm very open to the opportunity, just for that complete change of it. In terms of like the actual career, if you break it down to statistics, I mean, you could go like, I'd love to have a show that, you know, have the first British podcast to, you know, make £1 million in its first week. But those are just those are more about other things. I think for me, it's about creating more and developing more. And what I'm doing at the minute with this this conference that I'm putting on in Manchester, which if you're listening to this, the day it's come out is the next few days. Saturday the 23rd, Pods Up North. It's in Manchester. We'll put a link in the notes if you still want to come. I'll hold a few tickets back. It's about building community, and I see what podcasting can do. I honestly believe that podcasting can do to the media what Uber did for taxis and what Airbnb did to hotels. It opens it up to everybody. Everybody can have a podcast. And what's great about that is everybody can do their own spin on it, their own version of themselves.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Okay, so we're gonna hit some quick fire questions.
Okay.
Because the battery's running out. Equally, I think I'm gonna try doing this a little bit more. So first question is, why Manchester, not London?
I've done both. I lived in London for 5 years. Absolutely loved it. And I've been back in Manchester for a little while now. Love the city equally, and this is kind of where I grew up. But I'm getting to know it different. But weirdly, in the few years that I've been away from London, it's changed so much that when I go back, I look like a tourist again.
It will all be new again. Won't it? So, what was the best decision you've made in your career or in your life? It doesn't have to be career.
Wow, the best decision I made. I think the best decision that I've made was probably in recent years was when I was in a position where I couldn't really afford it, was to buy a ticket to fly out to Anaheim on the West Coast, so just outside LA of America, to go to a podcast movement. And the ticket at the time probably cost almost as much as the airfare and the hotel, but I went and I booked myself for a week to be there for the whole event. And did not know anybody that was going, and I was kind of like, this is something I'm taking seriously. And if I'm going to do it, I need to be there. And I've gone from doing that and not really sure if I was doing the right thing, barking up the wrong tree, and not knowing anyone, to going back this year as a speaker for the second time.
Oh, brilliant.
And also to the point where I've been something of a connector in that I know everyone that comes to these conferences. So yeah, I think that's probably been one of the most fun and influential things that's happened, which is
Awesome.
just to drop this in, sort of indirectly because of my event.
Check that out. What's the best advice you've been given by anyone?
70%. 70%. Right.
That's really interesting. Someone told me 80%. So it's Pareto's law is 80-20 principle. But why is it 70 for you?
Well, so this is from my friend Jason Peterson Delaire, who is the musical director for Michael Bolton. So that is some serious authority.
Oh, wow.
So he plays saxophone on stage with Michael Bolton every night. And he says that, at the end of the day, you consistently push out 100%. Occasionally he'll hit it, but more likely, he'll hit 80, 85. But his thing is that his 70%, the level that he's at, and he's from a level that he's at, if he puts out 70%, like, I'm looking at it, I'm going, that's the most amazing.
He's better than the rest of us, isn't he? Yeah.
It's twice as good as my sister, who has a grade 8 saxophone. Yeah. And so it's more, I know, I appreciate Pareto's law, but this is more of a working way of going with it. And I think the thing is with that is just relax into it a little bit more and just kind of go, if I can deliver that, and if I forget something, that's fine. I'll deliver it next time. If I drop a note, and there's something, I don't know if you're familiar with the Cortinas.
Yes, yeah.
So one of the cool things I got to do at XFM as they were just coming up is I got to film Liam, literally just me and him in the studio as he played. And I suddenly became so aware of every noise that my body made just while I'm filming, just the eeks and cracks on my bone as I'm filming him this close to him. And as they stopped, the buzz came over on the other side, and there's 8 people on the other side of the glass. And I'm like, how was that, Liam? And he was like, hit a few bum notes, but we're great. And they're like, and I'm crying because it was that beautiful.
It was amazing.
That's happened. But then, interestingly enough, that same studio, I managed to get my brother and his band in the next week to do a recording. And they kept stopping and starting again because they were so desperate to get it right. They were so desperate to get it absolutely right because they were there, and this is a big break for them to be at XFM. And then you had this guy who was just so relaxed with it. And it was like, I got a bit, but it's a bum note. What does it matter?
Yeah. Awesome. So who's the person, you don't have to say the person if you don't want to, but I can't see why you wouldn't. Who's the person that's helped you most in your career? Can be your mum if you want.
I think family has been very important to me and very influential and had a bigger impact than I ever realized that I'm only just starting to realize. And I think as well for them to support me in terms of what I've done, and as we've gone through, I've had quite a varied career. I think for a long time the regular question would be, do you have a proper job yet? But they've kind of been acceptance that I've never become the black sheep of the family. I've always been welcomed back with open arms if that was ever needed. So I think in terms of that model of love and acceptance, that's been great. I mean, there's dozens of people that have helped me in my actual career in terms of what I'm doing now. Jim that I work with, Jim Salverson, who's the head of the sports social at Community Corp. He's doing some amazing things. He also runs his own voice company, Hive, just as a friend, but also a business partner. That's been amazing. Vic Turnbull and Kate Cocker that I'm working with at the minute on Pods Up North have been incredible. And also it's really nice when you work with people that closely that you become like family, and you see the moments when, 1 minute they can be this absolute tour de force on stage, and then you see them come off stage and kind of going, was it all right? And you're kind of going, that was amazing, just and yeah, I think anybody that kind of accepts me and pushes me is a good thing. I think that's very much. So I'll have to give a big shout out to Mick Tully, who is my martial arts instructor. He has his own plastering business in Coventry. I also help him do his podcast where he speaks to other martial artists. But he's always been able, and through his medium of martial arts and also through his questionable comedy sometimes, he's been able to sort of like pick me up and steer me on the right path when I've had a few moments. And yeah, and there's more people I can mention, but that's a really good question. That's a book in itself. Yeah.
What are you most proud of?
So last week we just published our 250th episode of On the Left Side, and that, as I said before, that's a real passion project. I mean, the money comes from other sources, but the what's really nice about that is because it's all us. It's come from what we do, and there's a story about somebody meeting John Lennon and telling them that they were an author, and John Lennon asking, could I read your book? And they were, I haven't written a book yet. And we're in this wonderful time now where I can meet somebody and I can say, I'm a podcaster, I make podcasts. And they say, can I listen to it? And I go, yeah. And instantly they can have all 250 episodes of that on their phone. I can put them onto Mondeo Law, which is another show that I work on, the Sports Social that I do, all these hundreds of projects that I worked on. And it's there and it's in the tip of their phone. And what's really nice is I've done it and I've moved on and forgot about it. But it's still there, and occasionally I'll be reminded of it. Like you'll talk about the episode with the Lego guy in, and it's a fun memory, and it's a body of work that very quickly builds up. And you'll find exactly the same with your show. 2 years, like that's so impressive. Like 101 shows, when the average show length in terms of is 7 or maybe 8 episodes before it falls apart.
I've met quite a few not quite a few. I've met some people that I'm a podcaster, so not necessarily, not to be mean, but the first, like, how many episodes have you done? 10, 11 in the last 2 years. It's like, okay, fair enough. Moving on swiftly.
But the thing is, I wouldn't ever want to put people off and have a snobbery about it and say that, but because there's a lot of barriers to stop people coming from.
No, that's true.
There's a show that I do, which is a very tiny feed, but it's because I use it just for when I'm doing a keynote. It's called Pod From Nothing, if you want to look it up. And it's a podcast which you generate in the space of 20 minutes while I'm giving a keynote, just to show people how easy it is to do that, and also to liberate them from the things that stop them from going out and making it.
Fear and inhibition and things like that are major things, and I mocked them slightly, but it was more in the sense that there's a lot of reasons why people can't or won't do it, which really are not valid in this day and age. So I would agree.
But I think you're the kind of people who are talking about maybe the ones that big up their career and say that.
That's more like I'm this and I'm that.
Yeah, I think there is an element of, like, at the minute, I think podcasts are this generation's being in a band. It's like a rite of passage. Yeah, it's like, and instead of going, I've got a drum kit or a bass guitar, it's like, I've got a Blue Yeti. So let's come around mine and we'll make a podcast. And you know what, the thing is, there's so many podcasts out there. There's still much fewer than you've got on YouTube in terms of channels, depending where you look for the figures. So Apple lists currently 750,000 podcasts.
Okay.
Google, using their analytics, the way they look at it, they list 2 million. Now there's questions about where they're drawing the data from, what they're counting. Not everybody submits to Apple and to iTunes, so possibly that's that. So, but still, that pales in comparison to the billion channels that you've got on YouTube. But even so, I would say that not everybody needs a podcast. And so some of the work that I do at the minute is as a mentor, and I work with some very high-end clients in terms of what they want for their podcast. And sometimes that's coming in from the very beginning to create their podcast for them. Other times it's, a year into, I'm bored of it, it's hit a wall, I need to refresh it, can you help me do that? And sometimes you find that people are doing what they think they should be doing rather than what they want to do. And I would say I find podcasts so exciting because it's a medium where you totally can be yourself, because you are the presenter, you're the producer, you're the CEO of the broadcast company that is your podcast. And so the only person you need permission from is yourself, and you don't need to be like anybody else.
I 100% agree. Okay, we're going to going to have to call it a wrap there, mainly
Bleep,
because I've
bleep,
got
bleep, 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 bleep.
3% on my. I've been trying to get through as many questions as I could, but I now have 3%, so I think I probably should.
Okay, but make it super dramatic and just cut it off in the middle of a sentence.
Should I just stop now? No,
Yeah.
no, I've got enough time. So thank you, Ant. Thank you so much for making time to speak to me. It's been a lot of fun and really interesting. And so thank you.
I mean, I'm not sure how much business has been there, but hopefully, you've got something from this, even if it's like how not to do things.
I got 2 questions, so hopefully my audience will like that.
I mean, if anybody wants to sort of follow up, you can find me on all social media at Ant McGinley. And our event is taking place the 23rd of November in Manchester, sponsored by Spotify. It's Pods Up North. Look for at Pods Up North as well. We'll hold a couple of tickets back just for your listeners. So if you mention Mark, we'll get you in.
Thank you. So if you drop me all those places where you are, I'll put them in the show notes, and we can. If anyone wants to find you, they can find you there. But equally, social media is a great place to find you.
Yeah, although from your research as well, you can probably find my credit number and address.
Well, no, I've got that as well. I'm actually going to bribe you now after I cut off the recording. All right, and thank you so much for your time. You can check me out on all the different platforms. You all know where that is now, on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, everywhere that there is. I usually have a platform. So thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ant, and I'll speak to you soon.
Bye.
Bye.